Well, good morning to all of you. And here we have, of course, Scott Walter, because it is Wednesday, whatever day it is. I can't keep track anymore.
Hump day.
It's hump day. Exactly right. Well known. All right, Scott, we had one major piece of robotic news over the last week, and that would be Elon having a conversation with the All In boys over on the at the All In conference. And he was talking about what he's expecting and what he's seeing in terms of the kind of a timeline for the humanoid robots, as well as explaining to them what we already know, because you explained it to us about the puppet hand. What did you see? Tell us what you thought about the comments at All In.
Okay, there were, let's say, a few little nuggets in there. And again, I'm going to be careful about reading between the lines, but when you start to string together a lot of the comments that we made, I'm getting a better idea of exactly what this whole process is like for the Gen 3 bot. So let's first roll it back to the 5th of May. And that's the first time that Elon mentioned, just out of the blue in a reply to a post by Dr. Jim Fan about the 22-degree freedom hand that's coming. So it's just like, whoa, wait a minute, why is he suddenly doing that? And then later on, when everyone was asking about it, he then said, oh yeah, and most of the actuators are going to move into the forearm. So that's kind of the first glimpse we got at that. And in the All In Summit, he mentioned that the 22-degree freedom hand is still like in a prototype phase. And there he indicated that it's more like, it sounds like all the actuators have gone in there. So that means there's been some iterations in the design since May. And more than likely in May, nothing had been built. They had just had a meeting where they decided they were going to do it. And Elon was just so excited about it. He just had to blurt it out. And so they've probably been doing a lot of refining, looking at that and what they want to do. So what that means is that they have a disembodied hand that's probably on a lab stand somewhere that they're doing a lot of testing before they're actually putting it in there. And of course, he's mentioned that it really is not so much a new hand as a lower limb, which is something I had pointed out. It's like, as soon as you're putting in there, you're really talking about it being one big unit. And why would you stop there? Start doing everything else. And so the other thing he said, and he kind of also backed up, is that the Gen 3 design is still not complete. So they're still working on that. So I have a feeling probably right around that time, they were really thinking of doing a major update. And by redesign, I mean, I think they're like throwing everything out and starting from scratch. So Gen 2, you can see the pedigree that, definitely it's related to Gen 1. And it's just like some refinement and improvement upon that. And so I think they took it up to a level and then realized that they could only get so much out of that design, and they have to do a complete rethink of the whole design from top to bottom. And that's probably what they're going through now. And which means you may not notice any resemblance between the two. It will be very different. So that means, by the end of the year, they expect to have one, and that by the end of next year, Elon has said that they expect to have 1,000 or a few thousand operating factories. So that's an interesting data point there. So part of it is that I think, they're not just designing it, but they're also trying to figure out how to manufacture, make sure they can do it. They're probably pretty sure they can scale it up. But he then said it would be 5 to 6 years before they get to 1 million plus annual production. And so you kind of sit there and say, oh, okay, so what's the scale factor on there? So we know that if 1 million is 10 to the 6, right? And if you start with 10, then, that's, over 6 years, the scale factor is 10. But they're not starting at 10. They'll be starting at about 1,000. So it probably looks like the ramp up will be a scaling of about 3x per year to get you up to about there. And that should be pretty easy to do. Now, 3x is not easy to do when you're talking about automobile production or something like that. That's a lot harder to scale up. But there are many other items that, are not as complex that, scaling up 3x should not be that hard. Now, during the course of that, he mentions that there'll probably be at least 3 major design iterations in that 6-year period, which, I'm not surprised because everyone is working on, their other designs already. Again, remember how I said, like, I'm just such a genius here of predicting that all these robot companies are like working on their next designs.
Right.
And they've proven that, in the documentary that Jason Carman did with Bernd Bernick of 1X, right in there, he kind of blurts out that, the Neo 2 is going to be so much better,
Right.
but they've got to stay focused on getting this one. So it's like, wow, I mean, they've already got a Neo 2 that they're working on. Well, this one is the beta is being released out there, so that's not a shock. Peter Diamandis also let the cat out of the bag in his interview with Brett Adcock about having seen, the Figure 3 bot already, or at least the designs for that when they just announced it. So they're always iterating constantly, and guarantee that it's not just those 2 or 3 companies, that they're all looking at what they have to do to improve, learning from their mistakes. So I suspect that the Gen 3 Optimus is really going to be head to toe very different, very, very different.
Okay, so if we look at some of the nuances of those statements that you just talked, because in some ways I think they can be interpreted in different ways. So is the 5 to 6 years from day one, or is the 5 to 6 years from now?
I think like from about now, again, 5 to 6 years. Is it 5 years or is it 6 years? Looking at it, is it, and more or less hedging his bets, because usually, Elon time is just like, it's like, no, it's not going to happen. And, in this case, it's like, he's actually being very conservative on that, they could scale up faster. And a lot of it may be because I don't see anything that would prevent them from being able to hit that. It's not like they can't produce enough chips or something like that. Part of it might just be whether the capabilities of the robots are there yet, that, there's actually a market for 1 million that quickly. Of course, we were saying, look, there's a market for 1 million today. Yeah. So there shouldn't be any problem, but there could be a lot of teething pains and everything else going on there. So I would see no reason why you wouldn't be able to do it. Now, part of the limitations could be is that how many of them would be useful in factories where the robot doesn't have the certification to be able to work near other humans? Because right now, none of them do. So they still have to be fenced off, which is like, well, wait a minute. That's the whole point, is like, you're swapping out the humans. They're going to have to work side by side. And so it may be that that's something that limits you in the first year or two before you get these designs that, let's say, would be considered safe enough to work around humans. But yeah, I see a lot of changes coming to the Gen 3, and that I'm comfortable to say that they're probably going to completely redesign from the pelvis down. The whole leg is going to change.
So then he says that it typically takes 3 iterations before you really have the kind of the case where you want to really go to mass scale. So would the Gen 3 be the first iteration?
I think so.
2 more.
I think so.
We don't count Gen 3 as iteration 3, even though it's called Gen 3. It becomes the first complete, ready to manufacture in quantity version.
And he said that about anything, it's like, don't buy the first versions of our car. There's going to be quality issues and stuff like that as they go through and ramp up. So, when Model 3 came out, it's like, hey, that's already like, the third or fourth car that Tesla has. So, is that your third meter? No, it's like they're iterating on that to try to improve it. Same with the Cybertruck. It's like, look, they built so many, but it's going to be a while before you're able to get the cost of that down, get some of the, the quality up where you want it to be. And so that's why I'm saying Gen 3 is not going to look at all like Gen 2.
Yeah.
And part of it is that there were probably a lot of design things that they put in there that everyone really liked. And, it's very hard that when you have something that's like your baby, you just kind of love it. It's hard to like realize that was like, no, it's wrong. We've got to completely redesign it. And so there was some elegance in the way the hip was done that you could look at it from one standpoint. It's like, oh, it's very efficient. The exact same servos everywhere, all mounted the same way, simplicity of constructing and everything else. And it's like, yes, but functionally, it's not actually getting the job done. And we can see that because the bot can't walk very fast, and they're not getting it up there. They also are lacking the ability in the waist to kind of bend over a bit more. So it's extremely stiff. And I think you need to have a little bit more flexibility in the waist, which we see a lot of these other bots are having that as well. And part of it was over optimizing too early on. And now we're seeing parts going back in. So remember the first Optimus had no movement in the head.
Right.
Gen 2 has movement in the head. Okay. So they threw those parts out. Now they're throwing them back in. The fingers, they're going from an 11 DOF to 22 DOF. And so they're realizing, oh, we actually have to do it. And so if they're doing it there, they're going to be thinking about it a lot of other places. And what I want to talk a little bit about is like a lot of the redundancy we have in our human body for things. So if I want my eyes to look to the left or right, I've got 3 ways I can do it. Short of actually moving my eyes, which would be a 4th way, but so long as I keep my eyes forward, one way is I just turn my head.
Right.
Okay. The other is I twist my torso, and the other is I just move my feet around like that. And in at first, the Gen 1 Optimus, you only had 2 options. You could actually turn the torso, and of course you could move the feet. And there's some advantages to wanting to turn the torso, because a lot of times you like to have your feet there, and it's a lot quicker to be able to move back and forth to do these different kinds of actions. But then they realized that, well, we need to move the head. Part of it might have been because that's what the teleoperators were doing, and things were getting kind of confused with that. But also, there's just some advantages of moving the head without having to move the whole torso.
Sure.
So that means you get redundancy through there, and you could argue, well, wait a minute, do we need that redundancy? Do we want to get it out? And it's like they found that, no, we need to have all that redundancy. Okay, but what about leaning forward? So we as humans have 2 ways that we can lean forward. One is that we can actually flex our entire torso and bend at the waist. The other is we can go through our hips, and we can absolutely flex at the hips forward like that. And this is what the Optimus design has done, is that the only way you can lean forward is it actually has to lean to the legs. And it's like, what I kind of show in this model here, that in order to lean forward, you're actually kind of bending it, here on the legs, as opposed to actually having it flex that way, right?
Got it.
So right now it's stiff. So that's the only way Optimus can do it. Again, going back to that pelvic design, they decided, I think because they didn't want to carry the mass in the legs, that the 2 motors that actually cause your legs to do pronate and supinate this way, and also the abductors, are up high, resulting in the swing joint being very low. So Optimus legs are moving way lower than everyone else. I mean, we're talking like 6 to 9 inches lower than a lot of the other bots. That means your stride is shorter. That means you can't move quite as fast. And so they've got to move it up. They got to move that back up. And so what's happening is that Optimus is like really stiff, because that joint is so low that in order to lean forward, you're leaning at a point that's way, way, way down there, when you'd like to have it more naturally up where your waist is. And they already have kind of a waist joint there for being able to this and that. So they're probably going to redesign it and realize that, okay, we want to get that other movement in there, because if you want the bot to be able to get in and out of cars and stuff like that, you can't be that stiff. And so that's why I think like the whole pelvic area is going to change, and the leg design will probably change. And I have a feeling they might reduce the number of linear actuators they have. They may just throw them out and go pure rotary on almost everything else, because they over engineered the upper leg to make it almost too biomechanical. And as a result, they're not getting the swing speed that they need to be able to get the stride. And that's just my observations. And
Sure.
I think they can be pretty much backed up, because we have not seen anything showing Optimus walking any faster than what we saw back in the spring. And even then, that was like a 30% gain over a very small number. So it was still a small number. And they need more than a 30% gain. After the 30% gain, they still need to double the speed. Okay. So they need 100% on top of that. And we're not seeing that. And we had some promises of something coming out that we haven't seen. So I have a feeling that it may be most of their focus is going on the Gen 3 right now. And not really trying to squeeze out any more performance from Gen 2, because they probably just realized it's not going to work.
So interesting. So much of the commentary over the last few days from elsewhere has been, well, Tesla doesn't have a hardware problem. They have a software problem. And yet all we've talked about so far is the hardware, that
Mhm.
while we may not have a hardware problem, Elon said, and I think this would be kind of like his aha moment with the truck, with the Cybertruck, where he was like, no, it has to be about the future. Elon has had an aha moment where he says, no, it has to be like a friend, like a human. It has to be a buddy.
Mhm.
It needs to act like a human. And we have, I'm always forgetting the name of that company. I think it's in Canada that has said,
Sanctuary. Mhm.
Sanctuary, who said it's got to be like a human. And it seems like that maybe that's starting to overtake the entire design.
Oh, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that, so yeah, so the hand is going to be a lot closer to the actual human hand. And a lot of it comes down to the kind of mappings that you need to do between your training and the capabilities of it. And so you don't want to have something that approximates a human. You need one that's like very close to the same kind of motion and same degrees of freedom that you would want to have in the capability with your hands, because the hands are just so important. And, all our interactions are through there. And, our fingers are of certain lengths, which allows us to get away with something. And now the bot's trying to do it, and it can't do it because its fingers are longer than yours, and it's bumping into things. And so there's a reason they're going to do that, which is why I think the 22-degree freedom hand is going to have different length fingers, because Elon has been talking about the importance of the pinky many, many times. And the main thing everyone notices about the pinky is not that it's your fifth finger, but it's the shortest one, right?
Yeah.
Yet it seems to have an important role. So they want to get closer to that. Again, like the head movement and things like that come also important for the teleoperator to be able to not be like this when they're operating, but to be more natural. So,
Okay.
and again, that's why I think you're going to have to get some flexibility in the waist. They're probably going to be discovering that as well. That when people lean over, they lean over from a very different point. And if you want the training sets to kind of match what the teleoperator is doing, you've got to get a closer match in the kinematics.
All right. So if we are going to get real conservative here, then the conservative analysis would be 1,000 to 3,000 bots next year, all working in the factory. Maybe something on the order of 10,000 being sold to others in 2026.
That's
But
possible. Yep.
then we would have 27, 28, 29 to get to 1 million. That still just seems like such a slow ramp compared to anything else that Tesla has ever done, including, cars. I guess maybe the closest example might be semi trucks, but that was I think that was a do-over for a number of different reasons that they decided to spend another 2 years developing. So is that really, in your head, is that really what you think? Because other people seem to have interpreted that the 6 years would have been from the beginning of the bot, which is about 2 years ago, which would put us at about 2027 when we hit the million level.
Well, yeah. If you're going to be starting with a base of 1,000, which we'll probably see next year, then if you just 10x from there, then in 3 years you're at 1 million, right?
Right.
And then so that puts you like 20. And so again, it's kind of a conservative. And remember, Elon was like, 1 million plus. Well, what does 1 million plus mean? Like 1.5 million, or does it mean 5 million, or what does that mean? And if you listen to Barrett and others, they're also looking like, they could be producing an order of 1 million somewhere between 2028 and 2030. I think Suzanne Gildert, she also was like, looking at like that 10x ramp that you'd be going from here on up, that everyone is getting around that by 2030. Maybe some are able to get a little bit sooner. So, we'll have to see that, 1x feels like, they have something, and they have the capability to mass produce. And we'll see, if they're able to do that and scale it, if it's designed for that. So it's interesting to hear more than one person sort of being able to reiterate those numbers.
Yeah. And just flipping back just for a minute to his idea that this robot will be a buddy. And I think he made other comments in X along the same line that, we're already corresponding with ChatGPT, our Grok, as if it was a friend, as if it was a counselor, as if it was a therapist. I know I've asked it, how should I say this, or how should I do that with regard to a complex personal relationship, that this will be, better than your dog because it'll be able to talk to you.
Talk back. Yep.
And just this morning, I forget which company it was, but one analysis of the Grok was that it is at this point a better communicator than any of the other systems that are out there right now in terms of understanding as well as the way it talks. And of course, if you use the humorous version, it is, it's funny. It might be funny kind of in the same way all the time. So maybe we need a couple of different kinds of humor. I'm not sure. But it is very snarky. It's very kind of fun way that it responds. So again, it seems like all of this is leading towards a HAL or an iRobot type of relationship, as opposed to merely a clunky looking, not so fun, work tool.
Yeah, I'm sure that it'll be able to take on certain personas or personalities. So it won't just be the same snark coming out of Grok. And I'm sure you'll be able to say, look, I want you to behave more like C-3PO, and then it will be, that kind of humor. And then you could say, oh no, I want you to be like, Robbie the robot from Lost in Space. And you just kind of pick one, or some famous individual. Who knows?
All right, let's switch to space for a minute. We've got a lot going on in the space.
Yeah.
I think let's start with the good news. The good news is that we've got a launch of some private individuals that have now gone to a greater apogee. Well, you tell it. I'm not the scientist here.
So, after many delays in Polaris Dawn, mainly just the weather. I mean, the weather down here in Florida has been, rainy and everything else. And they needed to make sure the recovery area and everything else also had adequate weather. They finally were able to do it. Now, I think they were like 40% probability of launching on the 10th, and it was early morning for some reason. and the launch got delayed. It was supposed to be at like 3:48, and then I got up and it's like, oh, another 2 hours, sleep another 2 hours, and then it launched. I think it was like around 5 a.m, and it was cloudy, but it was a good, successful launch, and we got to see it going up, and then the separation of the Dragon capsule from the second stage, right around the Terminator. So it was kind of perfect. So they launched in darkness. So it was still nighttime here, but because they're going to the east, they were heading into the sun. As opposed to like if you have a night launch or a late evening launch, you're going into darkness. So basically when that trunk separated from the second stage, they were entering dawn. And that's like, I just caught the picture that put out there and just said Polaris Dawn, which is the name of the mission. And so that was basically the first time they got to see sunlight as they had gone up. So on their ascent and the way up, it was very, very dark. But it went smoothly and everything else. And they've then they've gone to the highest apogee since Apollo, and even higher than Gemini. And so they'll be collecting, a little bit of medical data, and they're going through lots of different experiments. And I think it should be maybe tomorrow is when they're going to be ready to do the spacewalk. So they have to go through 2 days of sort of changing the atmosphere over. So it used to be that the capsules were always pure oxygen. And the Apollo 1 fire was a result of like a pure oxygen atmosphere that was like, that was sea level atmosphere. And that's a problem, is that things that are considered inflammable in normal, atmospheric conditions will be very flammable in a pure oxygen, high pressure. And so since then they've used mixed gas, because the whole idea is like, in space, we don't want to have the mixed gas and all this stuff, because it just, it adds more mass and more components. But they switched over that on the ground you had nitrogen to make sure you didn't have that. And as you went up, you could then change the pressure in the capsule, because all you need is a partial pressure of oxygen. So I think our partial pressure of oxygen is like 4 PSI or something like that. So that's actually all you need in the capsule. But because they're coming from nitrogen, and whether there was nitrogen in the capsule or not doesn't matter. The thing is, they were breathing Earth air before they got in the capsule. And so they have a certain amount of nitrogen already dissolved in their system that you need to get out. So you don't want to get the bends.
Mhm.
So there's a slow process that they're going through decompression with, a pure oxygen atmosphere to make sure all the nitrogen is purged out. So you don't have to worry about, the bends or anything like that. Because if you're doing a spacewalk, you don't want to have your suit pressurized to one atmosphere because then you'll be like the Michelin Man. It'll be really hard to move around. So the lower the pressure in the spacesuit, the better. And so that's what they're getting ready to do. And they all have to go through it because they're all going to be exposed to the vacuum of space.
Right.
So once they get it there, they will be able to depressurize the entire capsule. They will open up a hatch, and then I believe Sarah and Jared will be the ones doing the spacewalk. And I'm not sure if they're going to be free floating away. I think they might. They'll be going out and using what they call the Skywalker, which is like a little ramp they kind of set up that they'll be able to go out and poke around and look at everything like that to test these suits out. So yeah, that will be exciting. And it looks like they will be streaming that live, and the streaming should be pretty good because they plan on using the plug and blazer, the demonstration of that,
Right.
which is they hope to be communicating directly to the Starlink satellites.
Yeah.
Which will bring everything down. Now,
speaking
at
of
3 a.m. this morning, I get an email from Starlink to say that they've changed the roam plan. So, it was that you had a roam plan where it was okay to take your dish and move around for, RV use, but you couldn't use it in motion, even though it would kind of work. You weren't really allowed to and all the other things. Well, they've thrown that restriction off and say that the roam plan, you can now use it in motion up to 100 miles per hour.
Wow.
Means it won't work in your airplane, and it will work in coastal areas, and it will work out of country.
Wow.
So before the restriction out of country, you could not use it before. So that's big. So anyone that has a mini, that means you can throw it in your duffel bag or your carry-on bag. And if you fly over, to a country where, Starlink is supported, it will work there. But, it's like, I think, 2 months out of the year, you can do that. It's like if you use it in coastal waters, it's like for about 2 months. And then, then you should get back to your normal. And you can pause and unpause it, which is nice. So if you've got it and you just want to use it for a couple of months of the year, then you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you just use it kind of as a stationary thing. So I'm hoping to do that on like my next overseas trip to see if I can just put the Starlink Mini in there and whether it actually works abroad, just to test it out.
And they mentioned some milestones. I think 1 million units now are deployed. At this point, 1 million
of
Starlink.
many, I think they've done more than that.
Oh, I thought
or was it? There was something about the production, the new facility they had. I think they had
Right.
already produced more than another million, but they had been producing them in other places.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think their
That
new
was one
facility
facility- that
is
new
it the facility in Bastrop, or is that where it is? I think.
Yeah, in Texas.
They have it. Yeah.
So they produce 1 million there. They've already got. They make them in Buffalo, right?
No. I think they were making them up in Kirkland.
Oh,
Or somewhere up in Washington. I think that's sort of where the Starlink team is up there. That's been working on it, and the manufacturing is down in Texas, or they're setting up manufacturing there. And I know they have well over 1 million subscribers already. I'm not sure how many they have, but it's definitely taking off. You're seeing more and more people use it, and it's turning out to, I think, be more successful than everyone expected.
Yeah, and Elon said the other day that some people were criticizing SpaceX because they are so dependent on government contracts, and he says no, actually, commercial income at this point is greater than their government income. So that was kind of interesting to know.
Oh yeah. And it's more like the government is dependent upon SpaceX,
Right.
because someone's going to put those satellites up there.
Yeah.
And these are not handouts. These are not welfare checks or charity. It's like, they're expected to actually provide a service, and the service is they're launching national assets that need to be up there. And not only are they doing it, they're doing it for a lot cheaper and on schedule than everyone else. Right. So I don't see why everyone's complaining about that, because, if you look at anywhere you work, the chances are whatever you're producing, some of that is coming through the fact that the government is consuming part of the fruits of your labor. So, I mean, it's like, GM is getting government subsidies because I'm sure, government motor pool is buying stuff from GM, and they're buying it from Ford and everything else. It's like, oh, is that a handout? Government handout? Oh, so.
And then And then we've got the government, which has a contract, several contracts with space, bunches of contracts with SpaceX for space, for future deployment, a $500 million contract with the U.S. Army to be able to deploy Starship anywhere in the world in a minute. I mean, I'm sorry, an hour, which is, something that Tesla can, that SpaceX really can't work on until they get more SpaceXs. Man, before they get more Starships launched. And yet we've got several departments of the government apparently trying to get in the way of the Starship launch that's supposed to happen.
Yeah, and it seems like it's more or less that there are these activists that are just trying to do anything to gum up the works. And they're just trying to exploit every single loophole and force this government agency to come in there. Of course, the first thing was unfounded things about the deluge system, and then the department said, the wrong form or something like that.
Yeah.
And then everyone being upset about the fact that they spilled a little bit of potable water, in the ecosystem. It's like it's fresh water, and then you go down there, and right now the whole area is flooded from rain.
Right.
The rains that are coming in. So nature's actually throwing more of the same stuff down there than SpaceX ever did. So it's absolutely disingenuous. And this is where these activist groups, they have to be very careful. If you really want people to have sympathy for what your cause is, then make sure it really is a righteous cause, and you're not doing something that you're just proving that you're just trying to be a thorn in everyone's side for no reason.
Yeah, no kidding.
And that's what it is. It's like I'm not listening to these people anymore because they've lost all credibility.
Right.
That's absolutely silly. And the latest thing is, like, they're afraid about where the hot staging ring is going to land in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
And it's like, really? I mean, it's like things are getting dropped in there all the time from rocket launches constantly, and no one makes a big deal about it. And so they want to know what the marine impact of this thing is like landing in the ocean. So,
well, Scott, I promise to get you out of here by almost now. So unless you've got a parting shot, I think we've covered all the things that we talked about covering.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the last thing is cross your fingers on the 1010 event. That's I put my my request in. Anyone, I shouldn't say this. It's like, it's full up. Don't even bother. Don't even bother signing up for the event. You won't have a chance.
Well, I promise everybody, I will be in Burbank. I will be in Burbank. I don't know whether I'll be inside the building or not, but it's only about 50 miles from.
How's your pole vaulting skills?
Yeah, like pole vaulting.
Where the fence is, you'll just jump right on over.
Or maybe my conversation, my negotiation skills.
Your negotiating skills. Yeah, that doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't work. Oh no, don't tell me that. All right, Scott, thanks as always for coming on and letting us know what's going on in the worlds of robotics and space. And until next Thursday, and to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.
Yep. Okay. Bye now.